My grandfather was a minister, and I understand he would often finish his sermons with a quotation from a poem. Perhaps Alfred Lord Tennyson's "All is well, though faith and form be sundered in the night of fear." Or, "Speak to him, thou, for he hears, and spirit with spirit can meet. Closer is he than breathing, and nearer than hands and feet." Or maybe he'd close with a verse from a hymn, which can have all the artistic merit of a work of literature and often more of an emotional punch. "O cross that liftest up my head, I dare not ask to fly from thee. I lay in dust life's glory dead, and from the ground there blossoms red life that shall endless be." While some of us might still use literature in this way, and at least some of the time, it's not quite what I want to say today. I'd like to suggest that literary themes can enhance your preaching in more organic ways if they're set up to engage and challenge the hearer. Of course, technology allows many of us to present literary texts directly in a way that allows us to go deeper than if we were relying only on the spoken word. Printing a poem or a quotation or a verse from a hymn in the order of service or putting it up on the screen gives people the chance to read it and make connections for themselves. A printed order of service means they can take it home and think about it a bit more later if they want to. I vividly remember an exam question in systematic theology, which had a verse of "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and the question discussed the significance of the titles used for Jesus in this text. I've never sung the carol in quite the same delightedly innocent way again. But giving people permission and encouragement to pause over words and ideas, well-formed and thoughtful, can be a gift that can outlast the sermon itself. Where to find such suitable poems? Well, a great place to start is Scottish religious poetry and anthology. Try the work of poets whose faith journey we know something about. George Mackay Brown's Healer. So we may see, dear people, blessings may break from stone, who knows how. Or Edwin Muir's One Foot in Eden. Strange blessings, never in paradise, fall from these beclouded skies. Or poems which are more regretful, more critical about faith and its loss, which can be explored just as fruitfully as those which speak of a confident faith. Liz Lochhead's The Offering is as sad and damning of childhood experiences of church as you can imagine. Never in a month of them would you go back. Sunday. But surely we have something to say in dialogue with this, which acknowledges the memory but says something new and powerful. It can also be worthwhile to share something of the life of a well-known writer and draw out parallels which are meaningful to the congregation, especially through that writer's work. I preached once on Robert Louis Stevenson in a church where there's a handy visual aid in the shape of a statue of him. It was a service marking the start of an academic year, and I was able to talk about Stevenson's academic failures, his need for several restarts of his academic career, second chances, and all from the perspective of the rest of his life. Known more for the rejection of his faith, the faith of his parents anyway, nevertheless I was able to share the book of prayers that he wrote for family worship in Vailima, the Samoan island on which he died, and to talk about a remarkable poem of his, a poem called If This Were Faith, a poem chock-a-block with biblical images describing a real Jacob wrestling at the river moment. And contend for the shade of a word and a thing not seen with the eyes, and the half of a broken hope for a pillow at night, that somehow the right is the right, and the smooth shall bloom from the rough. Lord, if that were enough. I'd suggest that this poem is a perfect touching place for any sermon which asks, what is faith and how it might be found and how it might be lived, fresh for the most postmodern struggler or skeptic. Poetry is accessible and often quotable in its form for preachers, but other literary genres can be brought into sermons too. I suppose the key thing is to set a novel or a short story in context so that everyone has the possibility of engaging with it, even if they haven't read it themselves. And that might include the best-selling thriller of the moment, if it's had publicity and there are themes which might be explored from a Christian perspective. Salvation, apocalypse, creation, resurrection. All of these are the themes, the very stuff of literature, classic and more modern. Characters, plots, readers' responses, all can be drawn in to discuss the embodiment, the making real of theology. Great preachers have always known this, of course. From my teenage years, I've been hugely influenced by the preaching of Andrew McClellan. In one of his published sermons on the story of the paralysed man in Mark 2, Andrew starts by describing the character Stevens, the butler in Kazuo Ishiguro's The Remains of the Day. Andrew does just enough to explain the situation of the character, the way Stevens sees his whole life in terms of being a butler. And then he describes a particular scene in more detail. We get a little bit of quotation. And it's the scene in which Stephen's father is having a stroke or a heart attack. He's dying in the kitchen. Stevens wonders what to do, but then he realizes his duty is to go upstairs and to see the gentleman upstairs and to do what he can for them. Andrew suggests that all sorts of things in that butler's life have been suppressed, never given the chance to grow. Stevens is indeed emotionally paralysed inside. And he talks about how sad, how tragic even, that is for him and for those who love him. He goes on to say that paralysis can indeed mean many things. Now, the example works for those who have read the Booker Prize-winning novel, and those who have seen the film of the book, and those who've heard about the novel or the film, and those who've never heard of either, but could imaginatively enter into the butler's world. Literature and preaching works when sufficient touching places are offered for all to engage in it. And when the connection is made, it can be really powerful. So, my take-home message is this: take time to read, widely, indiscriminately, and read with a mind that's open to the themes which will inform your preaching. I'm not going to be boring and tell you need to develop a system, which means that you can index your thoughts and your examples in a way that you can discover them again later. You should, of course, develop such a system, but I have to tell you, I'm not very good at that. And I would hate you to do that in a way which ruined your reading experience. And what I find is that the thing that I'm reading at the moment often offers me the sort of example that I want for the sermon I need to preach that week. Is it serendipity? Is it inspiration? I'm not sure. But I have to be honest and say that I don't preach every week anymore. So, what about my top tips? And here's my last point. My top tips for novels that you might find inform your preaching. Modern novels that you may or may not have heard of. Try the trilogy of novels by Marilynne Robinson, Gilead, Home, and Lila. The most profound reflections on the parable of the prodigal son that I'm aware of, and much else. For something lighter and pacier, but still with something to say about the interface between faith and society, try Peter May's detective thriller trilogy set on the Isle of Lewis. If you enjoy science fiction or speculative fiction, try the Mad Adam books by Margaret Atwood. Ask, is this really the future of religion? Sarah Perry's The Essex Serpent raises some historical issues around themes of science and religion and issues about integrity and faith. You might like to engage with the new atheism of a writer such as Ian McEwan, Atonement, would be a great place to start. And again, there's a film of the novel that people may well have seen. And for a fascinating and disturbing exploration of Mary, the mother of Jesus, try Colm Toynbee's The Testament of Mary, a tantalising and controversial way to introduce your congregations to the world behind the Gospels, the process which might have led to their production, as well as something about the character of this enigmatic figure. But above all, never be apologetic about reading literature to nurture your soul and feed your preaching. Thank you.